In this lesson, I'm going to show you some easy techniques to draw hands. And just like the cue ball, we're going to be drawing from a photo reference. I've supplied you 10 photo references of hands that I lit and photographed for you to practice when you're finished with this course, but I've specifically chosen one for this exercise. Just go to the course curriculum and download this image. It should be labeled Hand 1 JPEG and print it out at 8.5 by 11 on regular printer paper. It doesn't matter if it's color or in black and white. You're also going to need a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper to draw on. It can be plain printer paper. It doesn't make a difference. If you want to buy a pad of Strathmore drawing paper for this class, that's great. But it's important for this exercise to work that you cut your paper to exactly 8.5 by 11. Your drawing paper must be exactly the same size as your printout, or the techniques I'm about to teach you won't work. You're going to need a ruler or straight edge, and again I'm not using it for measurements, just to make marks like we did on the cue ball. And tape your photo reference down next to your drawing paper, just like in my example on screen. Just like in the previous lessons, I'd like you to have your laptop, tablet, phone, or whatever device you're watching this course on sitting next to your work area, so you can watch my demonstration, then pause the video and repeat the process on your drawing. I'm sure some of you are seeing a row of mechanical pencils and losing your minds. Don't worry, they're exactly the same as the leads in your pencil set. It's just easier for me to film using these because I don't have to sharpen them. And by the way, mechanical pencils are very inexpensive if you want to purchase a few, and the leads I believe cost less than $2. As you can see, I've reduced the spectrum of pencils I want you to use to these 5. A 3B lead pencil. This is the softest lead I'd like you to use for this drawing. You won't even see me using it until the end of the lesson. Second is a 2B mechanical pencil, which is the one mechanical pencil I suggested you buy, even though you have one in your pencil set. You'll see me using it to do all the line work in my drawings in this course because it's a good mid-range lead. So you'll need it to stay sharp, and I find that a 2B lead and a mechanical pencil just feels great to draw with. The rest of these pencils are exactly the same as the ones in your set as well. I've even labeled them so you can see which one I'm holding while I draw. An H lead, a 5H lead, and a B lead. And of course I'll be putting the lead I'm using in the left-hand corner of the screen so you always know what I'm working with. For this lesson, you'll also need to sharpen your mechanical eraser. Just use a standard pencil sharpener for this and get it as close to a point as you can. Okay, let's get started. Again, tape both your photo and paper down next to each other exactly as I did. With your ruler, start finding the major planes and lines that make up the shape of the hand, setting up perimeters, just like we did on the ball. Don't worry, I don't mean every line on the hand, just the basic outline, so you'll only need to make 7 or 8 lines. I'll point them out to you as we progress. Let's begin with this one. Let me explain what I'm doing here. I'm placing my ruler on the largest, straightest line I can find in this image, and drawing a parameter line right on my photograph. Then I'm going to make a dot where my ruler touches the top and left margin of the photograph. Then I'm just making a little dot on my ruler where the dot on the top margin is. Bringing my ruler over to my drawing paper, and drawing a dot in the exact same spot in the margin. I'm not measuring it. You can if you want. It'll get the same results. I just find measuring tedious. Now I'm going over to the left margin. Sorry it's out of frame, but I'm lining my ruler up with the top of the paper and marking where I made the dot on it. Then bring the ruler over to my drawing paper and marking a dot in the exact same place. Then I'm going to draw a line going from about where the bump in the thumb is to the edge of the paper, just like I did in the photograph. Now pause your video and repeat the steps on your photo reference and drawing. Next, I want to give myself a line for this flat plane on the pad of the thumb. I'll explain why I think this line will be useful when we're in the drawing stage. Again, I'm lining up my ruler, and I've made a dot exactly in the bottom right-hand corner and the other in the left-hand margin. Don't forget to draw a line. I forgot, but I'll go back in a minute. Make a dot and draw a line approximately where the thumb would be on your drawing paper. Now pause the video and repeat that process. Next, let's get a line for the tip of the thumb. Draw a line and make your dots. I'm making a dot on my ruler for the left margin, bringing it to my drawing paper and transferring the mark to its corresponding side. Now bring your ruler to the top of the page and make yourself a mark on it indicating where the top dot is. Mark that dot on your drawing and draw a line approximately where the tip of the thumb will be. Now pause your video and repeat that process. Oh look, I remember to go back and draw that line I forgot. Way to go, Joseph. Okay, let's make a line for the outside of the pointer finger next. Make your dots. Those lines on the photograph and the drawing have to correspond in order to help you find the proportions when you're in the drawing stage. I'm sure this all seems a bit enigmatic for some of you right now, but this quick, easy process is a step in a system that's going to make drawing this hand incredibly easy, even for the beginners in the class. Don't worry, I'll explain how to utilize the lines step by step as we progress. And repeat the dots on your paper. Before moving on, pause your video and repeat the process. Next, I'm going to put down a line where the tip of the pointer finger is. For those of you who are concerned that you won't know where to draw these lines on your own in the future, don't worry, we're going to do 3 of these hand drawings together from start to finish. By the time we're done, you'll know where to put your guidelines without my help. You'll just see it. Pause your video and repeat. Next, let's draw a line to represent the angle of all 3 of these fingers. Notice how they line up diagonally? This is a time-saving line because it'll show us where all 3 fingertips are by only taking 1 measurement. Pause your video and repeat. For this one, I want to draw 1 line for the angle of the palm and the outside of the pinky finger, so I'm going to have to average it. Notice my line isn't touching the finger and it's overlapping the part of the palm that's curving out. This line is going to be incredibly useful to help me draw a beautiful contour of that side of the hand. Pause your video and repeat. I'm going to put in lines for the top and bottom of the arm and we're done. Pause and repeat. That's a good start. The idea is to set up some guidelines as a perimeter. Some of the lines are there to help me find the right angle, some are there to make sure I don't make a finger too long. There is no wrong place to put a guideline, but the idea is to do as few as possible. And these lines are training wheels, so the better you get, the fewer perimeter lines you'll need. Of course, you could put in more lines if you need them, or if you find yourself in trouble and need a little guidance. Let's say here where the palm and fingers meet, for example. Which brings me to the next step in the process, drawing the outline. The reason why we're only marking the perimeter is because we're only going to be drawing the outline first. No interior lines until the outline is finished. I'll explain why I work this way as we progress in the next lesson. Let's start the drawing with this line up top. Most of the work is already done for you. It's just a straight line, and thanks to our measurements, you know for sure it's at the perfect angle. All you have to do is draw a bump where the meat of the hand is raised above it. Actually, to make it even easier, I'll put in a line to give myself the width of the thumb. Please do the same on your drawing. Start by finding the curve of the tip of the thumb. You should have enough parameter lines around it to make that easy enough. Okay, a couple things before we begin. I'd like you to do your initial line drawing using a mechanical 2B pencil, and do your best to keep your lines light for now. You're going to be making mistakes at this stage, and having to erase, but as long as your lines are relatively light and drawn with a 2B lead, they should come up easily with a rubber eraser and leave no mark behind. Here's my first mistake. I misjudged the angle of the line going from the bump to the thumb, so I'm going to give myself a new perimeter line to fix it. As I said earlier, I'm going to be leaving the mistakes I make in the edit of this course, for a few reasons. First, this is a sketch. I don't want you to think I drew every line perfectly on the first try. That would be demoralizing. It would make you want to give up, because every time you make a mistake, you would feel like you just aren't good at this, and that I must have some magic talent. It's not true. I make lots of mistakes, but I have a system to help me notice them right away. Which brings me to the second reason I'm showing you my mistakes. I'm going to teach you how to use your mistakes to fix your drawing. One of my goals in this course is to show you how to look at a line and see what's wrong with it. Is it too high, too low, wrong angle? Then erase it and draw a more accurate one. That next line may not be right either, but it'll be closer. I want you to think a little differently to get the inner curve of the thumb right. Rather than trying to judge the width of the finger or make the perfect curve, look at the negative space right here, the space that the line you drew over your photo makes with the curve of the thumb and the forefinger. Just draw the shape of this triangle on your drawing, and do the same to get the curve of the tip of the index finger. Can you see the triangle it left behind on the photo? Looking for the negative space lines make is a great way to fool your mind into simplifying the image by tricking it into looking for smaller shapes instead of the complexity of a hand. Use this line we measured earlier to help you judge where to begin drawing the inside line of the index finger, and draw it in as best you can. By the way, you may have noticed I'm not telling you when to pause your video anymore. That's up to you now. Watch as much as you think you can retain, then pause the lesson and repeat the steps I just showed you. It's going to go a bit slow at first, but the lessons will speed up and you'll go faster as you learn the process. Once that line's in, you're going to have to judge the distance between the fingers, and based on that, you'll know where to begin drawing the middle finger. I know it's intuitive to start drawing this finger from where your last line left off, but instead, try going to where it ends, starting there, and connecting the lines. It's a lot easier to make judgments and estimations when you know exactly where something starts and ends. Then it's just connecting the dots. What I'm doing here is paying attention to the space between the fingers to help me draw the contour line. Now you know how this usually goes. You try to guess the distance to the next finger and then guess the width of the next finger, and when you get to the last one, it's this tiny little space that's too small for a finger to fit, and you start erasing the work you just did. So instead, let's go up here and get this line in. I know this is also counterintuitive, but again, I want you to learn to work from the outside inward. Once the outline is in, you can put in the interior lines based on ratios that you know are correct. Otherwise, if you make one slight misjudgment and draw a line, then every line you draw after that is based on a mistake. And remember, when you're drawing this line, pay attention to its distance from the line you made with the ruler. That negative space is all you need to get a great contour. What you're left with are these two lines. Don't worry about the joints and don't worry about the fingers bending. First, draw in the negative space in between the pinky and the ring finger. Just the outline, no internal information. Once you have that in, you're just left with this empty shape. But don't just try to guess where the negative space between the ring and middle finger belongs. You need more information to guarantee you'll get that right. So go back to the outline. Start from the tip of the finger, and that will help you establish how wide it is. I can already see the tip I drew of the middle finger is a bit off. It should be more rounded. Now that I know the width of the middle finger, I can start looking for the negative space between them. And to help you get the shape of the curve of the ring finger, look for the triangle shape it makes with the perimeter lines again. Another good habit to get into is taking a moment to step back at the end of each step in the process and look at your work. In this case, I just finished drawing the outline, so I'm going to take a few steps away from my drawing and see if it needs any adjustments. I think the shape of the ring finger needs to be adjusted. Again, I'm just looking at the negative space between the fingers to help me make this change. Okay, hard part's over. Once you have the outline drawn, all the interior features will line up with one aspect or another, which makes the rest of the drawing much easier. For example, this bump lines up with this crease. And if you make a mistake from here on in, it will be evident. Again, one of the most important lessons I want you to take away from this lesson is how to notice and fix mistakes as early as possible. I'm just erasing some of my perimeter lines. Not all of them, just the few around the outside and the ones that are in the way. I don't want them to confuse me. Now we can start putting in some of the bigger, more dominant interior lines. This one starting at the thumb is easy because we have so much information to line it up with to help us judge where it should go. And it should fit right into that contour you drew of the right side of the hand. I'm just going to jump to the arm quickly. This has a little more of a curve to it. Put that in. There are never perfectly straight lines in nature. You can count on that as a rule. That's better. You can almost feel the weight of the arm now. Okay, let's move inward and find the next most dominant line. Let's go with this one. Look at what's around it to help you. Compare it to the angle of the arm using the pencil. Line it up with the bump on the hand if it helps. Try to isolate this one line with your eye and draw it in. None of the cracks around it or the shadow, just this one dark line. I'm just defining this a little. Okay, what's next? This line? No, there's not enough information around it yet. Let's put in this line. I know it starts at the thumb, about a fraction of an inch up from the line where the fingers meet the palm, and I know it ends here. I'll use the perimeter line to help me judge that distance. I know where it starts and I know where it ends, then I'll make myself a tiny mark to show me where the line curves up at its furthest distance from the finger line, and I have all the information I need to draw it in. No shading yet, and no drawing the wrinkles around it. That comes later. Just get the major landmarks in right now. That's the secret to getting that incredible detail professional artists get. It'll come naturally, you'll see. Now that you have that line in, this space is broken up into a much smaller shape, so it's easier to estimate the curve and angle of the thumb. The next line I want you to draw is tricky because it's more of an outline than a contour line. Outline the shape of the shadow. To help you, pay close attention to its relationship with the line you drew where the hand and arm meet. Now that I have the basic shapes in, I'm going to go back and draw the curve that connects them. There are two major lines left to draw. Can you see them? Here's the first one. I'm going to use this distance to help me judge where it belongs. And this is the second one. It should be easy to place this line because we've broken down the space we're working in to just this small area, and you have so many other landmarks to look at to help you judge its angle and placement. Now that I'm finished with the major lines in my map, I'm going to move on to the medium-sized lines and important shapes. This is an example of an important shape. I know it's more like a highlight, but just draw its silhouette. It's going to be a helpful landmark, so I want that information, but remember, we're not doing any shading yet. Before moving on to the details, take one last look at your drawing. Closely compare your drawing to the photo reference and tweak the lines you made. You'll start noticing subtleties in the lines that you didn't see earlier. The next step is to start drawing in some of the medium-sized cracks and creases, but they'll be easier to spot now, and easy to place because you have so many landmarks to use to your advantage to line them up with. I'll start with this line below the wrist. Next, I'll put in these little cracks and lines on the thumb. Do you see why it would have made no sense to put these in earlier? You need the outline and some major features to compare them to in order to place them correctly. It's a step-by-step process, and if you skip a step and misplace a line, it creates a chain reaction of mistakes. Don't worry, I'm going to bullet point the steps in the process for you to help you remember, and after this hand we're going to draw two more together, and I left you with plenty of photo references of hands to practice with in the course curriculum. Look at this bump in the skin on top of the thumb. Put that in and it'll help you place the wrinkle beneath it. All I'm doing is looking around the photo for the next darkest line and drawing it in. That's the extent of this step. Once you have all the medium-sized lines drawn, you should move to a lighter lead to get the lightest lines and cracks. This line is standing out to my eye, so I'll draw it in next. You should be drawing these lines in the same order as me, but in the future when you're doing this on your own, there is no wrong answer to which line is next. Drawing this crack next seems like the logical progression. I know it seems daunting when you look at all the lines and cracks on a hand at once, but just follow the order of darkest to lightest and put them in one at a time, and you'll be surprised how few there actually are. And doing this really makes a drawing look impressive. Here's the next one after it, just draw it in lightly. I know that at first glance this area seems like a confusing web of cracks and creases, but just focus on this spot and count how many lines are actually here. 5, maybe 6? That's easy. You see it now, right? Just put them in one at a time. Don't make up lines, keep count, and do them in order. When you're finished with that row, continue on to the lines in the shadow, and when you see them all starting to connect and line up at the top of the hand, you'll know that your drawing is on track. Okay, now I'll take a step back and see which line presents itself as the next dominant. This line on the palm of the hand will do. Do you see it now? And once that's in, I'll move to the one above it. I like to stay in one area at a time, so the side of the thumb, now the palm, etc. Okay, let's move to the fingers next. Oh, put in the nail on the thumb first. It's light, so barely touch the paper to indicate where it is. You'll be putting that in with an H pencil later. Now let's look at the fingers. Take them one at a time, starting with the index finger. Find the defining feature on each one, so if it doesn't have any creases, like this one, outline the shapes of the shadows. Use everything you have around you to help you place each line. For example, notice this crease lines up with the bottom of the pinky finger. This crease lines up with the one on the middle finger. And finally, the lines on the pinky go above and below that line. Okay, I'm stepping back and looking for any more dominant lines that I've missed. This line on the inner wrist is important. See how it makes the arm feel like it has dimension. Once I draw it in, it feels like it's turning. Okay, this is a good preliminary sketch. The next step is to turn it into a line drawing. To do that, we're going to need to talk about line weight some more. Controlling the weight of the lines is what's going to make this sketch into a confident drawing. It'll have weight and depth without doing any shading at all. Here's how it works. First, let's establish what direction the light source is coming from. As you can see, it's coming from the top left. Because this line is in direct light, I want it to suggest that by making it lighter. In fact, because this line is the closest part of the hand to the light source, I want it to be as light as possible. So I'm going to dab over it with a rubber eraser until it's about 30% of what it originally was. If you look at the thumb, you'll see that the line on top of it is a bit more in shadow, so I'll make it a bit darker, or give it more weight. And there's a little wrinkle I missed, I'll just draw that in. I think I went a bit too dark, I'll dab it with a rubber eraser to lighten it. Now remember, the light source is coming from here, so we want every line that the light is hitting to be lightened and any line that's in shadow to be darkened or heavier. Here's a good example. The bottom line of the thumb is darker, so let's go back over that line with a slightly heavier hand. Your line should also be more confident, so make sure it's one straight line, not a sketchy, choppy line. Great, now let's darken this line where the thumb and palm meet. Notice how dark it is in the photo reference. Don't worry about the little cracks yet. See this nice deep fold? Give that a dark line. It almost looks like a dark line in the photograph. Okay, move down. This skin fold on the palm looks like it would be about 10th value. Just draw in a nice dark line. I'm going to outline and fill in this wide dark line because it's so dominant. All of these lines on the palm are in shadow, so they should all be heavy. As I draw the line, I'm starting to notice some cracks and folds protruding from it, so I'll start putting those in as well. It's hard to define this shape with a line, so I'll just indicate it with some hatching lines. This whole side gets a dark line. Are you starting to see what we're doing? Do you see why I didn't darken the line on the left-hand side of the pinky? Because it's indirect light. By now, you should be looking at the photograph completely differently. It's not made of a web of confusing wrinkles and folds, those are actually very limited. Instead, you should be seeing shadows and light, and now you know how to translate that into lines. That's all the dark lines. Now I'm going to lighten the lines that are in direct light by dabbing them with a rubber eraser. Any line that isn't in shadow or direct light can stay as it is now, a midtone line. And that's how you manage line weight. Can you see the difference that made? It's simple but confident. You can feel the weight of the hand hanging from the arm, and it looks like it has depth and structure without any shading at all. I'm going to quickly switch to an H-LED and put in some arm hair. I'm using an H-LED because I just want to suggest it like an afterthought. Arm hair isn't exactly beautiful.